The poor puppy just wanted to go in to avoid the rain. The owner Dharma drove it out directly. To prevent it from coming in again, Dharma didn't even bother to put on his shoes and block the door. He was afraid that the puppy would rely on him, but he could never imagine how ruthless he was at that time. How heartbroken he would cry in the future. The next morning, the rain stopped and the sky cleared up. Dharma got up early and threw the unfinished rice cake directly into the trash can on the side of the road. Unexpectedly, the puppy saw it. It turned out that yesterday, the puppy did not leave after being driven away. Instead, it squatted by the trash can in the rain. Looking at the food thrown in front of it, the puppy thought it was specially given to it. So it made up its mind. It would follow this master. So from then on, every time Dharma went out, it would follow closely behind him. No matter how the other party drove it away, it would not leave even a step. But one day, a motorcycle suddenly lost control and hit the puppy. Dharma wanted to leave at this opportunity, but the shrill scream stopped him. When he slowly looked back, he saw that the puppy was knocked away for 10 meters. It stopped only when it rolled in front of him. Seeing the heartbreaking scene in front of him, Dharma wanted to step forward to rescue, but he heard the voices of the neighbors getting closer. Being a loner by nature, he left cruelly. He thought the neighbors would care about the puppy. Unexpectedly, they all stared at the perpetrator with worry. The neighbors were afraid that the wound would heal if they didn't rescue it, and the puppy was lying on the ground, not knowing whether it was dead or alive. At the same time, Dharma, who returned home, lit a cigarette anxiously. He tried to pretend that nothing happened, but by chance the TV was playing a movie scene of Chaplin taking care of a puppy. Perhaps he was moved by this warm scene, and after struggling for a while, Dharma rode his motorcycle and took the puppy to the veterinary clinic. Fortunately, the puppy was fine. It was just unknown what it had been through. It was extremely sensitive to the doctor's needle. At this time, Dharma unexpectedly discovered that he seemed to have a good relationship with dogs. All dogs liked him, but this made him even more scared, because he really didn't like puppies. So after explaining that the Labrador was actually a stray dog, he planned to pay the medical bills and leave. However, the self-taught veterinarian who loved animals said that puppies were very loyal. You saved them. How could they be ungrateful? So why don't you take it home first? Let it repay you for 2 days. Wait until I contact the adoptive family. I will take it away from you. Dharma thought it made sense. So he took the Labrador home, because pets are prohibited in the community. When Dharma returned home, he had to cover the puppy, but the tail accidentally exposed. It was still seen by the neighbor girl. Fortunately, the girl had no ill intentions. She also promised to keep a secret for Dharma. However, on the first day back home, Dharma completely regretted it, because he found that the dog didn't come to repay his gratitude, but rather to seek revenge. Not only did it eat more than he did, he would sing at any time at night. He made trouble all day long, so that the house became more and more like a doghouse. One day, Dharma, who could no longer bear it, suddenly thought of a good idea. He took the dog to a nearby park and untied the rope quickly after seeing that there was no one around. Before the dog realized that he was abandoned, he had already rushed home in one breath. However, when he thought he had finally gotten rid of the trouble, the doorbell suddenly rang. It turned out that the little girl from the neighbor's house kindly sent the dog back, perhaps to repay Dharma for abandoning him. Dog's behavior became more enthusiastic. Not only did it crawl into Dharma's bed in the middle of the night and lick his sleeping face with its big tongue, it would also throw all the mice it caught on him. In addition, the dog often attacked Dharma's crotch and took away Dharma's underwear while he was in the toilet. In order to get back his only piece of clothing, Dharma had to run all the way to the street. He became a joke in the whole community. The neighbors were stunned. In anger, Dharma called the veterinarian to ask when he could find a buyer. But the veterinarian said that you have to feed the dog some good dog food to make its fur beautiful so that people can adopt it. Although his eyes were full of fire, Dharma still followed the instructions and bought a big bag of dog food. Seeing that the Labrador was getting fatter and was interested in the TV from time to time, Dharma felt so wronged that even eating rice cakes was like a lump in his throat. Fortunately, the doctor arrived as scheduled and took many photos of the Labrador. But just after taking the photos, he suddenly realized that this was a female Labrador. Don't let it get too close to male dogs. Otherwise, you may have to give away a bunch of puppies. Dharma was scared and broke out in a cold sweat, because he didn't want to cause more trouble, so he immediately put diapers on the dog, physically isolated the possibility of mating. However, Dharma still underestimated the ability of the Labrador. Even if it didn't give birth to puppies, it could still turn the house into a doghouse. Looking at the white catkins flying all over the house, Dharma picked up a spatula and prepared to teach the culprit a lesson. But at this moment, the adoptive family that had been arranged in advance came and saw this scene. Try who would want to adopt a large dog that has torn the house apart? So no matter how much Dharma explained, he couldn't change the other party's determination to leave. After the adoptive family was scared away, Dharma was furious and wanted to punish the Labrador. Unexpectedly, the neighbors surrounded him. It turned out that the farce just now made them discover the existence of the dog. Since the community prohibits keeping pets, they ordered Dharma to send the dog away immediately. Otherwise, they would unite to send him away. Dharma, who was already depressed, was no longer tolerant as before, but firmly stated that, "This is my home, this is my dog, I will live here, and my dog can't leave either." Looking at the man who was always peaceful, suddenly it became ferocious. The neighbors immediately scattered after solving the human problem. Dharma called the veterinarian again. He told him about the adoption family that failed, but the veterinarian said not to worry. "I will continue to help you find a good family, but the premise is that you have to register the dog as a pet. Otherwise, your dog will not be presentable." Although it sounds a bit wrong, but Dharma couldn't tell exactly what was wrong. He could only suppress his anger and go to the pet registration station. Looking at other people's dogs, each of them looked like a human, holding them in his arms like a child. But his own child was like one he had picked up. Dharma felt guilty, because he was afraid that he, a stray dog, would be recognized and expelled. Fortunately, at work, the staff didn't care about the dog's origin. They only cared about the dog's name. However, Dharma didn't name the dog at all and could only say an onomatopoeia. Although he could see his perfunctory attitude towards the dog, the staff still signed and stamped it. In this way, the nameless Labrador became the legal dog name. No. 777. However, its status at home still did not improve at all. That day, Dharma habitually ate 2 rice cakes. As a result, when he washed the dishes, he found that there was no water in the water pipe. But he was not worried at all because the dog's tongue could also lick the dishes shiny and bright. However, his dog-abusing behavior soon attracted the attention of the pet registration station, and the person in charge of the on-site inspection was Dewey, who stamped the Labrador card. It turned out that on the day of stamping, Devika had given Dharma a dog-raising guide and reminded him that the most important thing about raising a dog is not to be impatient. However, the next second after receiving the booklet, Dharma impatiently threw it into the trash can. Devika was so angry that he was speechless, in order to retaliate against Dharma's arrogance. At the same time, he really cared about the living environment of the Labrador. Devika broke in, according to the law. Unexpectedly, the moment she entered the door, she widened her eyes in disbelief. This is not a dog at home. It's obviously a person living in the doghouse. It's obvious that Devika is not satisfied with the dog's living environment at all. Not only that, looking at the cheap dog food and the half-rice cake left in the dog bowl, Devika concluded that Dharma didn't take good care of the puppy. What's worse is that Dharma, who was in a state of irritability, suddenly started smoking a cigarette. Devika scolded him. "Smoking will make your heart and lungs worse for you and the puppy. I can't control your health, but please don't let the puppy get into trouble." At first, Dharma was dismissive, but as soon as Devika and her colleagues left, it fell straight to the ground. Looking at its owner who couldn't stand up, the sensible Labrador was very worried. It kept patting Dharma's chest with its front paws and kept barking to attract attention. Fortunately, the barking really attracted passers-by to watch. Some kind people even helped call an ambulance. But the only person who accompanied Dharma to the hospital was the Labrador, who desperately chased after the car. After the doctor initially thought Dharma had hereditary panic disorder, it did not have much impact on the body. However, if he smoked and drank heavily, he would have to undergo further examination. Dharma felt guilty after hearing this. He was even more afraid that the results of the examination would make him feel weak. Because although he used to be a loner and was not liked by anyone, he was strong and not afraid of being bullied. Even if someone offended him, he could beat the other person without leaving a single piece of armor. He was also conscientious at work. He never asked for leave, was absent from work, came in late or left early. As a result, he was promoted to a small manager in the factory at a young age. But if he lost this good body, he would no longer have the capital to do his own thing, and he would not have the courage to be arrogant to his neighbors and colleagues. Therefore, after returning home, Dharma fell into depression. Suddenly, then he thought of himself when he was a child. At that time, he still had a complete and happy family. Unfortunately, one rainy night, his parents and sister were in a hurry to get on the road. They didn't notice the stray dog that suddenly appeared. As a result, they were killed in a car accident. This is why Dharma hates stray dogs. However, things are always unpredictable. The stray dog that Dharma hated the most before has now become his only emotional comfort, the Labrador that he wanted to give away before. But now the family that wants to adopt the Labrador is coming slower and slower. The next day, Dharma was about to go to work. He found that the puppy was jumping around, watching the little boy on TV eating ice cream in the snow. He thought the puppy was also craving ice cream. He bought two without saying anything. But at this moment, the veterinarian also came with the adoptive family. Looking at the children of the adoptive family, they hugged each other around the Labrador. Dharma fell into emotional shock. He just stood there blankly. Until the puppy was taken to the car, he didn't react. As the Labrador gradually went away, the two ice creams he bought began to melt. The liquid dripped onto the ground. It was like blood dripping from Dharma's heart. Since then, Dharma's mood has become erratic. At work, he changed his usual calmness and often lost his temper with his colleagues for no reason. In life, he began to drink every day. In the intoxication, the days of confusion. That day, the little girl next door gave him a painting. The painting of a man, a dog, and a house made him fall into deep thought. Coincidentally, the veterinarian called him at this time, urging him to submit the dog license transfer procedures as soon as possible. This also gave him the opportunity to meet the puppy. However, as soon as he entered the new adoptive family, he was surprised to find that heavy snow was falling in the house. On a closer look, he realized that it was the masterpiece of the naughty Labrador. For a moment, Dharma, who had never smiled before, burst into a hearty laugh. Then the man and the dog were driven out of the room. But on the way back home, Dharma felt unusually happy because he no longer hesitated and decided to formally adopt the Labrador and named it Charlie. After getting the dog license for the former stray dog, now Charlie, Dharma also regained his life. He used to be a sociable person. He made many friends through Charlie. Under Charlie's advice, he not only began to slowly quit smoking, but also learned to take care of himself. Dharma even took the initiative to wear parent-child clothes and took photos with Charlie. In order to take Charlie out, he also transformed the old bathtub at home into a motorcycle sidecar. Not only that, he also changed his usual work. He encouraged his new colleagues as never before. I thought life would always be so happy. But one day, Dharma found that Charlie was sick. It turned out that due to inbreeding, Charlie suffered from an incurable genetic disease. Now he is in. There are only two choices in front of him. Either do chemotherapy to extend his life, but the process is long and painful, or do something happy at the end of his life. Faced with two options that are not optimistic, Dharma fell into grief. But when he saw Charlie jumping in front of Charlie in the snow on TV, he suddenly realized that what Charlie liked was not ice cream, but the white snow he had never seen. At this moment, Dharma decided to accompany Charlie to see the snow. He wanted Charlie to spend the rest of his time happily. So after saying goodbye to the little girl next door, the man and the dog embarked on a journey to the snowy mountains. Since this trip was destined to be unable to return in the short term, so before leaving, Dharma did. He bought a walking stick, wanted to give it to the rice cake shop grandfather, who always cared about him, but he had already bought a fashionable walking stick in the market. He didn't muster up the courage until he was about to go on a long journey. Dharma felt like a mentally retarded person in response to the kindness of the old couple. He used to keep his feelings in his heart. Now he feels guilty and regretful. But the walking stick he didn't give away made him more determined to accompany Charlie to see the snow and made him pour all his emotions into Charlie, and the vast snow-capped mountains thousands of miles away became the clear direction of his dark life. However, before he had walked far, the veterinarian sent him a video. It turned out that the veterinarian's friend found an unlicensed kennel that bred dogs as much as he wanted. A video of the kennel owner abusing dogs. The Labrador that was dug out looked a lot like Charlie when he was a child. Dharma looked at the man with tattoos in the video, who was approaching the puppy with a syringe. Dharma suddenly remembered that Charlie was also afraid of injections, so he tried to imitate the man's voice in the video and called out Charlie's former name. Unexpectedly, Charlie not only responded, but also hid behind a rock. With hatred surging in his heart, Dharma found the address of the kennel through a veterinarian and found the man in the video. Then, with Charlie's help, Dharma beat him until he screamed and smothered his throat with mud. Finally, Dharma and Charlie E. took a photo of the man's head as a souvenir. Visited here after Dharma, and Charlie left. The veterinarian immediately called the police under the joint action of the police and the Animal Protection Department. The illegal kennel was completely closed down. At the same time, Devika, who was very concerned about Charlie, visited Dharma's home again. When she found that the dog and the owner were not there, she immediately opened the pet registration, the surveillance camera installed in the number plate, and locked Charlie's location. Just at this time, Charlie had just left the illegal kennel. Thinking of Dharma's various perfunctory behaviors as a dog owner, Devika guessed that he must be an accomplice of the kennel owner and fled with Charlie. So began. According to Charlie's location, Dharma was tracked. On the other hand, Dharma, who was unaware of the situation, was looking for a place to stay with Charlie. However, many hotels prohibit pets. They were rejected every time. When they finally found a hotel where pets could stay without barking, Charlie started barking uncooperatively. Dharma had no choice but to pretend to be blind and let Charlie act as a guide dog. This saved him from sleeping on the street. However, the next day, when Dharma was buying supplies at the store, Charlie, who was tied outside the door, suddenly saw a fat mouse. Although it was meddling in the dog's business, Charlie was still a carp. He pulled the restraints and chased after him. Unexpectedly, he hit a police car and broke the car window. As a result, the man and the dog were taken to the police station for the first time. Originally, they only needed to pay a fine of 10,000 yuan to avoid detention. Unfortunately, Dharma only had 2,000 yuan left in his wallet. Just then, Devika chased after him. She said she could pay to redeem the dog, but she must not let Dharma go. She accused Dharma of being a heartless dog dealer. However, the police didn't care about this. As long as he was paid, he would release the man and the dog. In this way, the innocent Dharma was finally freed by the culprit. But before leaving the police station, he decided to teach the police officer who only cared about money a lesson. So when the police officer stood up to get something, he picked up a reflective ornament on the table. Then he aimed at the opponent's crotch, and looking at the shaking light spot, Charlie bit it with one bite. After leaving the police station, Devika squeezed into Charlie's sidecar seat without hesitation, because she considered herself Charlie's friend. She must not let the dog abuse continue. Dharma, who tied the dog for fun, succeeded, but Charlie shook his head and followed Dharma. Looking back suddenly, he used his feet to cast who was the enemy and who was the friend. At this time, Devika's colleague called again and said that the police checked the surveillance of the kennel. Not only was Dharma not an accomplice of the boss, he also beat the other party to nowhere to hide. Devika smiled awkwardly after hearing this, but it was getting late. She could only make plans tomorrow. As the stars filled the sky and were gradually replaced by the red sun, the two and the dog began to gallop in the wilderness together, although the journey was full of surprises and excitement. But the balance that was only decreasing and not increasing suddenly made Dharma panic. However, when he saw Charlie's great yearning for powered paragliding, he spared no expense to take Charlie to experience it. And after a day and a night of observation, Devika finally felt firsthand how strong Dharma's love for Charlie was. But just as she was about to leave with satisfaction, Charlie's condition suddenly worsened. Not only did he lose more hair, but the number of tumors on his body also gradually increased. At first, Devika thought it was just an ordinary skin disease. Until after seeing Charlie's pathology report, I realized the pain and heartache. Although I couldn't do anything for Charlie's condition, after learning the purpose of Dharma's trip, Devika called her friends in the media to interview the man and the dog, because she wanted more people to know about this heartwarming story of the deep love between man and dog. After the interview, Devika ended her short journey first, because of work. Dharma and Charlie continued to move towards their destination. When Dharma reached the wilderness, his motorcycle suddenly ran out of gas. They could only ask for help on the roadside, but after stopping for a long time, no car slowed down for them. After a long time, a kind brother with his dog finally arrived. Since both of them have dogs, they chatted very well. When they learned that Dharma had nowhere to live, the elder brother warmly invited him to stay at his house. At night, the two of them and their dog had barbecue in the yard. Dharma said gratefully that it was a surprise to meet you. The elder brother smiled and said that he had experienced many surprises before. For example, my wife eloped with me despite her parents' opposition, which was my first surprise. My wife, who didn't like dogs, gave me a dog as a son because I couldn't have children. This was my second surprise. Later, my wife cheated on me, and the boss left us directly, which was the third surprise. Although Dharma wanted to comfort him, He didn't know what to say when he opened his mouth, so he could only close his mouth obediently. Fortunately, the elder brother had let it go and decided to let the past go. In the following days, Dharma and the elder brother became close friends. Charlie and the elder brother's dog, Dahe, developed a relationship beyond friendship. They first had lunch together, then took a shower together, then kissed each other until they finally went into the woods and sang in harmony. But happy times are always short. Dharma found that the tumor on Charlie's skin was almost spreading throughout his body. If he didn't want to leave any regrets, he had to leave as soon as possible. Before parting, the elder brother gave Dharma a pass to the National Dog Show. Dharma thought it was meaningful, so he agreed to go and take a look. But when he arrived, he found that this was not a dog show, but an agility dog competition. The so-called pass was also a ticket to participate. At first, Dharma wanted to give up the competition because he had never thought of letting Charlie participate in any competitive events. But when he saw Devika on the stage as a judge, he decided to give it a try. However, other dogs jumped up and down after entering the stage and were full of energy and kept chasing their owners across various obstacles. But his Charlie only chased dog food. Dharma faced the ridicule of the chairman of the jury and the ridicule of the audience. Dharma began to refuse to interact with Charlie, but Charlie seemed to see his depression and took the initiative to extend his paw to make peace. The audience looked at such a gentle and sensible dog. The audience and the judges changed their previous attitude and began to praise Charlie when Charlie under. Dharma's guidance, when he successfully jumped over a hurdle that was 1 meter higher than normal, they clapped their hands enthusiastically. After saying goodbye to Devika, Dharma took Charlie out again. But at this time, they were almost out of money. They didn't even have money to buy Charlie medicine. Dharma had no choice but to sell his motorcycle. Then Dharma took Charlie on foot. When they were hungry, they ate the cheapest food on the roadside. When they were tired, they stayed on the street. Even though there were thousands of lights behind them, none of them were for them. What was worse was that Charlie's health was getting worse and worse. The babies who were conceived in her belly were all stillborn. Dharma didn't have any faith, but now he was willing to kneel in the crowd and pray the most devoutly. Maybe God heard his prayer. Soon after, they took a bus to the foot of the snow-capped mountains they had dreamed of. But the next second, the car was blocked by soldiers again. It turned out that there was a mudslide ahead. It would be impossible to pass the road without 10 days or half a month. The anxious Dharma wanted to force his way in, but the commotion attracted the army commander. Originally thought Dharma would be in trouble, but when the commander saw him, the commander did not show anger, but politely invited him to the barracks. It turned out that the touching deeds of one man and one dog had been reported and spread all over the country. The commander was also moved by this sincerity. Promised to send troops to escort him early tomorrow morning, they went up the snowy mountain. However, Dharma knew in his heart Charlie might not survive the night, so Dharma returned to the tent and took out the clothes from his bag. Dharma then carried Charlie on his back and carefully slipped out of the barracks. Then he walked from night to day, from the foot of the mountain to the top, and the moment he saw the snow, Charlie, who had been exhausted, actually jumped down on his own initiative, then miraculously recovered his former spirit, watching Charlie running in the snow. Dharma couldn't help but join in. Just like this, they played wildly in the snow for a long time, like before. The cheerful atmosphere permeated every snowflake. Even if the body was about to dissipate, the soul was liberated at this moment. After fulfilling his wish, Dharma decided to return home the next day, because many people at home were looking forward to seeing Charlie for the last time. However, when he woke up the next day, he found that Charlie was missing. Just when he was lost and didn't know what to do, the top of the mountain he visited yesterday seemed to call Dharma from somewhere. So he climbed up the snowy mountain again, regardless of everything. Sure enough, he found Charlie's footprints on the mountainside. Then he searched along the footprints. Finally, in front of the temple on the top of the mountain, Dharma saw Charlie's figure. Although Charlie was still breathing at this time, the bell of death was still ringing. Even if Dharma was unwilling to accept it, he could only watch it, and the signs of life were lost bit by bit in his arms. The little girl next door said before that Charlie had made a thank you gesture in front of him, but he never showed it again since then. At that time, Dharma thought the little girl was lying, but now he saw with his own eyes that Charlie used up his last bit of strength to express his gratitude to him. Then Charlie left the world forever. However, just as Dharma was crying in pain, the cry of a puppy suddenly came from the temple. He walked in carefully and found a black puppy. It came alive. Dharma knew that this was the hope Charlie left for him, because if Charlie was gone, he would have a hard time living in the future. But with little Charlie, he would have tomorrow again. A few months later, Dharma and Devika founded an animal rescue center in memory of Charlie and for more stray animals who need love and protection. 777. Charlie is directed by Kiranraj starring Rakshit Shetty, a drama movie released in 2022. Both parents died when he was young. Dharma, who was a loner and never liked to socialize with people. After helping and accepting the stray dog Charlie, Dharma's life became lively, and he no longer closed his emotions. After Dharma learned that Charlie had an incurable genetic disease due to excessive breeding, Dharma resolutely quit his job and accompanied him on a journey to find Snow. Although Charlie eventually passed away, the man and the dog experienced vicissitudes and happiness together. They healed each other's broken hearts, making life more complete. And the snow on the top of the snowy mountain flowers falling. Not only is Charlie's farewell poem, but also a poetic inquiry of the eternal nature of life. The appearance of the little black dog is not a simple reincarnation. It is a symbol of reincarnation, but a metaphor of life in quantum entanglement theory. Death is not the end, but a quantum leap of new life. Perhaps some people say that everything in the world actually has no meaning. Until the emergence of human thought, they were given spiritual connotations, just like Charlie's number is 777. Objectively speaking, it is just 3 identical numbers, but when someone is in adversity, it can completely represent a lucky miracle. In courage decadence, body rekindles the courage to fight, and faith is a magical thing. Although it sounds illusory, but as long as the heart is optimistic and firm enough, there will be an unexpected turn of events. And among all the beliefs adhering to the mentality of selfless help, it is definitely one of the most beneficial ideas for human development, whether it is helping people or any other species in the world. Chaplin also said in The Great Dictator, "I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I just want to help as much as possible. But now, greed has eroded our souls. It has blinded our eyes too much. Our knowledge makes us cynical. Our wisdom makes us cold-blooded. We think too much and feel too little. We don't know that in addition to machines, we need humanity. In addition to wisdom, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be full of violence. Everything will cease to exist. Fortunately, more and more people, souls have wings, flying into the rainbow, flying into hope, flying towards a bright future." Well, today's movie sharing ends here. Welcome everyone to like, comment, and forward. Thank you for your patience in watching. Looking forward to meeting you next time.